One day, in a city where the Taisho era has come to an end, the 20s continue into the 1930s. Ginza is a place in Tokyo where the west wind blows to the east. Today, a woman named Mitsuka Hoshino was seen walking through the city to go to a place where she could get a job. After some time walking, Mitsuka Hoshino then remembered that when she was about to leave for a place to find a job that suited her, suddenly there was someone who left to bring a snack for her cat when she was on her way home. The woman then told her father to stay calm because she would be willing to bring her cat a snack when she was on her way home. The woman then left and continued to walk down the streets of the city, until finally she found an office where she thought she might get a job. The office was called the Ginza Detective Bureau, although she thought it was not the kind of job she could imagine before, but she thought it was likely that she would arrive on time at the office at 12 o'clock. Mitsuka Hoshino finally arrived at her destination and met an old man who had been waiting for her in that place for a long time. She then said in her heart that she was actually not looking forward to meeting this old man, but she really knew about what her purpose was to come to this place. The old man then gave an indirect compliment to the woman. This was because, according to the old man, this woman had done a very fast job for a woman. The woman also showed a very friendly smile to the old man, and then the old man began to speak to her by calling her Miss Hosona while reading the piece of paper in his hand. Then, after hearing the old man call her by the wrong title, the woman immediately corrected him by telling the old man that she was named Hoshino, so that the old man realized that he had been wrong when reading the woman's name, and then immediately called Mitsuka Hoshino's long name with the correct title of Hoshino. The old man then said to Hoshino in front of him that he seemed to see that Mitsuka Hoshino had worked too hard, so he thought maybe the job she would soon get was a job that looked very difficult for Mitsuka Hoshino. But according to the old man, it was possible that Mitsuka Hoshino could do it well, because Mitsuka Hoshino was used to working as a career woman these days. So, according to the old man, it was better for Mitsuka Hoshino to relax once in a while before finally starting her work again. Mitsuka Hoshino then said that she thought, of course, the old man's bureau had a desire to hire people who could do heavy work. So, Mitsuka Hoshino then told the old man that with all due respect, she felt very capable of doing all the work well, because even she had experience in closing more cases that she solved than anyone else did. Then Mitsuka Hoshino also drank a cup of warm coffee that had been provided by the old man, and after listening to the explanation from Mitsuka Hoshino, finally the old man became real about whether Mitsuka Hoshino was experienced in being a detective. Then Mitsuka Hoshino immediately responded to the question from the old man by saying that she had been very experienced in being a detective. In addition, she has also been a detective in handling cases of infidelity to cases of missing people who have been handed over to her. Then, after drinking a cup of warm coffee that was on her desk, Hoshino further explained to the old man about what she had experienced during her time as a detective. Mitsuka Hoshino explained that during her time as a detective, what she did every day was trying to all the burdens that were in the minds of their clients who were experiencing problems in their lives, so that it meant she had to be somewhere immediately to ease the burden of someone who was in need. Mitsuka Hoshino also said about the risks she accepted while doing her job as a detective, where at certain times she had to keep trying to be indifferent to how annoying other people's words were directed at her, because from now on she had to be ready to do everything. Even though when telling all these things Mitsuka Hoshino's face looked very sour, Mitsuka Hoshino looks very sad. But she has a hope that she does not complain and still remembers at what age she is currently living, so that she will immediately realize at what age she is currently living, so that she never thinks of doing or acting like a little child who is complaining. Even so, she thinks that the world is currently in a hurry to make a change in order to succeed in realizing a city full of freedom. But on the other hand, she thinks about his existence, which remains silent in the chair where she sits while pensively thinking about the days she is currently living, where no day can pass without passing something that she thinks is wrong. After Mitsuka Hoshino finished meeting with the old man to continue her work as a detective, she then sat down to relax a little at a coffee shop near the city. Mitsuka Hoshino then mused while looking out the window and said about the days she lived, which she thought that not a single day would pass without making herself feel that she was not being suffocated. When she was contemplating about the life he was currently living, suddenly heard the voice of a man named Saku Yoshida, asking Mitsuko Hoshino about whether she was a detective or not. Then, after hearing the question from a man named Saku Yoshida, immediately Mitsuko Hoshino immediately stopped her reverie and immediately looked at Saku Yoshida, who was asking her with a very visible gaze, being fascinated by Saku Yoshida's handsome face. When looking at Saku Yoshida's face, then Mitsuko Hoshino was immediately surprised while calling Saku Yoshida a handsome prince who he thought came out of the book, and he thought it looked amazing. After Saku Yoshida called her a detective, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately looked down at the table immediately and said that he should not be too concerned about her being a detective because, according to her, he was only a small person. Because for her, even though she was a detective, but according to her, a detective should not have the nature or desire to stand out more than other people. After Saku Yoshida found out that Mitsuko Hoshino was a detective, he immediately said that he currently had a request to Mitsuko Hoshino, who was a detective. Then Saku Yoshida immediately took something that some time ago he found not far from his area and gave it to Mitsuko Hoshino. The object was a shoe that did not have a pair, so that it made Saku Yoshida feel confused about where the only shoe came from. Mitsuko Hoshino then saw it and told Saku Yoshida about whether what Yoshida Saku found was only one shoe, and then Saku Yoshida answered Mitsuko Hoshino's question that it was true that the shoe he found was only one piece and did not have a pair. Then Yoshida Saku also explained to Mitsuko Hoshino that the shoe was found by him lying on the ground outside where he worked, when it was raining heavily, so that he thought it was a mysterious event that made him think that with the shoe, as if someone wanted Saku Yoshida to find it immediately. Hearing all the things that Saku Yoshida talked about, his thoughts about the shoes he found, made Mitsuko Hoshino think about whether Saku Yoshida was playing tricks on her so that he acted like an adult, but it was clear that his way of thinking showed that he was still like a child. A child. Then when Saku Yoshida was preparing the shoes, he wanted to show Hoshino Mitsuko more clearly, and turned his back on Mitsuko Hoshino. It also made her guess. Shoot about how old Saku Yoshida thought he was, around 17 or 18 years old. It then made Mitsuko Hoshino think that it seemed like the thing Saku Yoshida was talking about was an interesting thing about the mysterious shoes he found. But he didn't like it, so he had to immediately tell Saku Yoshida that he refused Saku Yoshida's request to become a detective who investigated the shoes he found. But before Mitsuko Hoshino told Saku Yoshida about her thoughts on rejecting Saku Yoshida's request, Saku Yoshida suddenly told Mitsuko Hoshino that there was something at the toe of this shoe, namely something that he believed was a diamond that had been attached very strongly as a decoration of the shoe. Seeing this also made Mitsuko Hoshino become very surprised, and then said that all the things she saw seemed absurd. But even so, she felt that for now she would really say that he was lucky, because he had met someone who told him to bring a shoe that had a diamond attached to the toe of his foot, so that it made him finally feel excited to become a natural detective, to find the origin of the mysterious shoe found by Saku Yoshida. Saku Yoshida then told Mitsuko Hoshino that he had previously told the police about the shoes he had found, so that an immediate search could be made about where these shoes came from, but he thought that until now, the police had done nothing in an effort to find out the full details of the shoes he had found, so he then thought of finding a detective who he thought could immediately help him find the identity of the owner of the shoes. Saku Yoshida then told Mitsuko Hoshino that he became very curious about why someone would leave a shoe and drop it on the ground, so he thought it might be possible that the shoe was in such a place because the person wearing the shoe was in a state of panic because he was running away from something he didn't want to meet. So according to Saku Yoshida, if it really happened as he thought, it seemed like someone who was the owner of the shoe was in desperate need of help. This then made Saku Yoshida say to Mitsuko Hoshino that he really asked Mitsuko Hoshino for help, to be willing to use her ability to find certainty about the owner of the shoe, after which he also told Mitsuko Hoshino that he really entrusted the shoe to Mitsuko Hoshino, and gave a message that if one day Mitsuko Hoshino had managed to find something about the shoe, Then he told Mitsuko Hoshino to immediately return to the Sicilian coffee house, which was the place where they could meet. Seeing Saku Yoshida, who seemed to act like he was forcing her to immediately carry out the investigation process on a pairless shoe that she had found because she was a detective, made Mitsuko Hoshino begin to think that Saku Yoshida was really like an insolent child, because when they had not known each other long enough, he had given a task suddenly to Mitsuko Hoshino and asked her to immediately provide answers to questions that had always been in his mind since Saku Yoshida found the shoe. Mitsuko Hoshino then immediately returned to his office and left the coffee shop, which was the place where he met with Saku Yoshida. After arriving at the office, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately rushed to enter her room, bypassing a staircase first while telling herself that even when he got a rich client before, she felt that she was not so fluent in being a detective, so it seemed that she might not be able to act quickly in investigating the case of shoes left on a street belonging to Saku Yoshida. But even so, she still felt that she was on the right track because she was able to help others find answers to their questions about events. When Mitsuko Hoshino arrived at the top of the stairs and was about to approach her room, she suddenly became surprised because there were several weird writings that had been written by someone whose identity she did not know. She then read more closely the writings that contained words about her that were considered to have taken the job of a man. In addition, there are also writings that say that HSE should step down from her position as a career woman. And after that, there is one more writing that states that women are more appropriate to stay at home without doing any work. After reading all the writing clearly, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately screamed and said that it was really very terrible according to her. Then, when an old man who was nearby also read the writing, the old man also said that all the words written in front of Mitsuko Hoshino's room were indeed a very terrible thing. Then the old man then told Mitsuko Hoshino that it seemed like the work he was doing now made her have many enemies by showing an attitude as if talking to her cat who was in front of her. Not only that, in addition to the words written in front of Mitsuko Hoshino's room, there are also several writings written on a sheet that is currently being held by the office boss. And when read, there are words that women are more appropriate to stay at home and not work. Immediately after seeing all the writings, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately sat down with a very sad face and then told the old man that she really apologized for always making more work for the office boss. The office boss then felt bad after hearing the words of Mitsuko Hoshino, which showed that currently Mitsuko Hoshino was very sad after reading all the writings circulating in this office about her, who was a woman who currently preferred to be a career woman rather than just being at home. So that made the office boss told Mitsuko Hoshino not to say words like the one she had said earlier. Furthermore, the office boss immediately gave words of motivation so that Mitsuko Hoshino became more enthusiastic in carrying out her work, even though she was a woman, by saying that if something then changed, it would not happen without an effort, so he thought it was pointless to apologize. In addition, according to her boss, everything that happened was also not a burden that Mitsuko Hoshino had to bear alone, and her boss then encouraged her to continue to be enthusiastic because she felt that they could continue to struggle to carry it together. Mitsuko Hoshino then began to think in her heart about all the kindness of the office boss who, according to her, continued to help her by elevating her degree, so that it made Mitsuko Hoshino wonder about how many times this would continue to be done by her office boss to make her even more enthusiastic at work. Mitsuko Hoshino then became a great desire to tell something that had previously happened to her. Mitsuko Hoshino then, without hesitation, began to talk about the biggest desire in her, who as a child had a dream, a goal that she really wanted to realize, namely to become a policewoman. But she told her office boss that when she had this desire, her father became very angry because, according to him, when a woman has a desire or aspiration to become a policewoman, it is a very unreasonable aspiration. The office manager, who had always been kind to her, then said that being a detective might not be exactly what Mitsuko Hoshino had aspired to be since childhood, but even so, a detective for whatever reason would still be a detective who would always be willing to help others in solving a problem in their life. After he explained all the things to get Miss Mitsuko Hoshino back into her job as a detective, who seemed to be getting almost desperate, finally, the office boss asked Mitsuko Hoshino a question about her opinion to consider whether to continue working with them as a detective or not. However, while talking like that, the office supervisor did not forget to suddenly ask Mitsuko Hoshino about the cat snacks she had ordered long ago to Mitsuko Hoshino, so that it also made Mitsuko Hoshino, who was seriously lamenting the things she would choose in the future, become a little surprised at the question from her boss, who suddenly asked about her cat snacks. Instantly, while thinking about her choice whether to continue working as a detective or not, Mitsuko Hoshino suddenly remembered all the things that Saku Yoshida told her about her question about why someone left a shoe by dropping it. Besides that, she also remembered how Saku Yoshida had a strong feeling that maybe the owner of the shoe was trying to escape from something, so she became very panicked and immediately left her shoe, because if that was the case, then according to Saku Yoshida, they had to immediately help the person by finding it. That's what finally made Saku Yoshida ask for help from Mitsuko Hoshino to use her skills as a detective to find things that could give her clues about where the shoes she had found came from. Then, after thinking about all the things that Saku Yoshida had said, Mitsuko Hoshino finally became increasingly eager to hone her skills as a detective, so that she immediately began her work as a detective Mitsuko Hoshino. After deciding to continue her work as a detective, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately rushed to the coffee shop and met with Saku Yoshida in order to discuss further about the shoes that he found. Mitsuko Hoshino also told Saku Yoshida that after she investigated, it was true that the diamond on the toe of the shoe was indeed a real diamond. Hearing what Mitsuko Hoshino said about the authenticity of the diamond made Saku Yoshida finally explain also about the shoes that he knew that it turned out that the shoes were an Italian-made product that had come to the department store closest to the coffee shop about a month ago. Hearing what Saku Yoshida said made Mitsuko Hoshino then ask Saku Yoshida about where he knew so much about the shoes, and then felt that maybe a Saku Yoshida had learned to be an appraiser of something he found in front of him. After Mitsuko Hoshino asked Saku Yoshida about it, Saku Yoshida replied that he was not a judge as he said, and told Mitsuko Hoshino that he was just a waiter who always tried to be very humble but looked very pale compared to the other waiters in this coffee shop. Then Saku Hoshino, who felt that he had not been introduced to Mitsuko Hoshino, then said that his name was Saku Yoshida to Mitsuko Hoshino, and said that he was very happy when he saw Mitsuko Hoshino had returned to the coffee shop to use his abilities as a detective in conducting an investigation regarding the shoes found by Saku Yoshida. Mitsuko Hoshino also immediately introduced her name to Saku Yoshida so that from now on they already knew each other about their respective identities to establish a friendship relationship which was started by the discovery of a shoe by Saku Yoshida. Then after the introduction, Saku Yoshida asked Mitsuko Hoshino for permission that he would call Mitsuko Hoshino as Miss Mitsuko Hoshino, which then got a response from Mitsuko Hoshino, who said that according to her. Saku Yoshida did not need to call her Miss, because it would only drop her self-esteem in front of others. Then when they were talking more deeply about the shoes that had been found by Saku Yoshida, suddenly a man came and said "Excuse me" to the two of them, and immediately wanted to say something to them about the shoes they were talking about at the moment. The man they didn't know before suddenly tried to get into the coffee shop and said that it was actually the man who had dropped one of the shoes that had been found by Saku Yoshida. Hearing about what the man said made Mitsuko Hoshino immediately want to say about the case of one shoe that they had been investigating where it came from. But before Mitsuko Hoshino said a word to the man, Saku Yoshida immediately closed Mitsuko Hoshino's mouth and said that they had to be very careful when dealing with someone who suddenly claimed to be the owner of the shoe. Saku Yoshida said that to Mitsuko Hoshino because he felt they could not simply believe in the man. This is because at the toe of the shoe there is an ornament made of a collection of diamonds. So it is possible, according to him, if there is a coffee shop visitor who hears all their conversations and then immediately claims to be the owner of the shoes. Then the man tried to make Mitsuko Hoshino and Saku Yoshida immediately believe in all his words, so that the man said that the shoe was a gift that he would give to his old friend. However, the man then told them both that before he had time to give the gift of the shoe to his old friend, there was suddenly an argument between the man and his old friend, which finally made them both fight until they became frustrated, which he thought was the reason, so that finally the man threw the shoe into a river not far from the coffee shop where they often met to have a discussion. When the man was trying to explain about the shoe to Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino, suddenly Saku Yoshida remembered that he had seen this man before in a place he had also been to. After remembering more about the man, Saku Yoshida finally really remembered that the man used to come to this coffee shop often, along with a woman who always brought curtains and sold them. Then, Saku Yoshida continued to try to remember more about the man so that he could finally tell Mitsuko Hoshino that the man and the woman who had always come with him to this coffee shop were a family that seemed very strict and also conservative, so that it made Saku Yoshida feel very unimaginable that the two of them would wear something so flashy like shoes that had diamonds on the toes. The man then told Saku Yoshida that he felt that he and the woman he was always with would never get along because the woman's parents would not allow the relationship to continue. However, Saku Yoshida then asked the man what he meant when he said that he originally wanted to give a shoe as a gift to a woman who was an old friend of his. According to Saku Yoshida, it was possible that the woman might not like the shoe because of its striking color. So he finally told Saku Yoshida that if he were in the man's position, he would prefer to give something else that the woman would like more than a shoe that he thought was very striking to look at. After Saku Yoshida said something like that, suddenly the man looked like he was going to get angry at him for saying it, so Saku Yoshida said that he was just joking and saying all the things he had just said. It also made Mitsuko Hoshino look sharply at Saku Yoshida and said that he thought the things that the man gave to his woman were not a bad thing, while Saku Yoshida continued to praise himself, who he thought was very blessed for having a good memory of someone he had met before. On the other hand, the man finally said something to Saku Yoshida in a slightly shouting tone and a face full of annoyance that he thought that all things that were suitable or not suitable for the woman were none of Saku Yoshida's business, so he asked Saku Yoshida not to act like he knew everything about him and the woman. The man then left Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino after he said all those things, which made Mitsuko Hoshino then told Saku Yoshida that whether the man was lying about the shoes he said were his or not. Then Saku Yoshida said that he really had to be very careful in determining the attitude towards everyone who came to claim to be the owner of the shoe, and Mitsuko Hoshino also told Saku Yoshida that she thought it was too early to judge all the attitudes shown by the man. Then, after the man left, suddenly there was a woman who came up to them and introduced herself, that she was named Fumi, and then explained that actually what the man said was true, that the two of them often drank tea at the Cecilia shop, and then said that the man was named Shoichi, who was her old friend. Seeing the woman who tried to explain about the man who had assumed that the shoes were his, that he would previously give to the woman who was his old friend, made Mitsuko Hoshino immediately rush to show the shoes to Fumi and ask if Fumi remembered about the shoes or not. After asking a question by showing the shoe to Fumi, suddenly Fumi's face turned glassy. Glass in her eyes because it seemed like she was holding back sadness when remembering the incident behind the shoe. But before Fumi could say anything, suddenly, Fumi's father came and asked about whether there was a detective or not in their coffee shop, then introduced himself as Fumi's father. After that, Fumi's father said that about the shoe from the beginning, and from now on Fumie had rejected it, so that it made Fumi's father indicate that it seemed like this was the cause of Fumi finally rejecting the shoes that the man gave her, so that it also made Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino immediately think that maybe all the things said by the man before were true. Then they also felt that it seemed that no one cared about whose shoes it was, except the man and Fumi. Finally, because they felt that they might find a more accurate answer to the question of who owned the shoe in the river, Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino invited Fumie to immediately go to the river in order to confirm whether the other shoe was in the river as said by the man or not. Fumi then immediately left to join the two of them walking to find the whereabouts of the shoe in the river without his father, which finally made Fumi then apologize for the attitude of his father to Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino. Then Mitsuko Hoshino told Fumie that he did not need to apologize for the disturbance caused by his father. While walking along the river, suddenly Fumi said that all the things that had happened between her and Soichi were very unfortunate because previously she thought that all the things Soichi had said were lies, so she didn't believe him. Then, according to Fumi, there was one more thing she remembered that made her and Soichi fight violently, but the memory was very vague according to Fumi because she felt that she seemed to remember a beautiful woman who had worn the shoes. However, she couldn't say who it was because she looked like a stranger that she had never met before, which made Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino turn their faces towards Fumi, who had been walking behind them, and asked Fumi who it was. But Fumi said that she didn't know who it was. Fumi then told them that she thought there must be something between Soichi and the woman, so that it made her conclude that the two of them were not just old friends. It also made Mitsuko Hoshino also say that Fumi was a very beautiful woman, and the way the man said all the things he told her made her feel that there seemed to be a similarity between everything they said about the shoe. This then made Mitsuko Hoshino, who was a detective, try to think for a moment, and then try to remember about the words of the man who said that he had thrown the other shoe into the river, and according to him, the river on the Tsukiya Bridge was the only river that was close to the coffee shop. So Mitsuko Hoshino immediately rushed to invite them to go to the river. After they all arrived right in front of the river immediately, Saku Yoshino smelled a very bad smell, so that it made him cover his nose with his hands, and then asked Miss Mitsuko Hoshino about his desire to check the shoes by approaching the river, which he thought was very unlikely for them to approach because the smell was very bad. Mitsuko Hoshino did not seem the least bit concerned about the unpleasant odor as said by Saku Yoshida, and she also continued to look around the river, and then said that she was very curious about where the river flow had slowed down, so that it made her then rush to immediately look for it. After they approached and reached the riverbank, Mitsuko Hoshino tried to continue pawing the river using a small piece of wood that was quite long, while on the other hand, Saku Yoshida was busy covering his nose because he felt that the river had a very unpleasant odor. Then, while looking at the river suddenly, Saku Yoshida got a doll, which he then showed to Mitsuko Hoshino as a detective, and asked him about whether he thought the doll he currently got was a teddy bear or a dog. It immediately made Mitsuko Hoshino become a little annoyed at Saku Yoshida for asking about something that he thought was very unimportant, and then told Saku Yoshida that it seemed that for that matter, she did not need to provide any assistance in answering Saku Yoshida's curiosity about the doll because he actually already knew it. Then Saku Yoshida seriously told Mitsuko Hoshino that she shouldn't have to do all the scavenging on the surface of the river like she was currently doing, but Mitsuko Hoshino then answered Saku Yoshida's words by saying that she didn't need to say anything like that because this was her job as a detective. Then Saku Yoshida said that what he meant was because Mitsuko Hoshino did all these things because of a request from him, so that it made him feel bad about Mitsuko Hoshino for having to do all these things. It then made Mitsuko Hoshino immediately say that she did all these things because Saku Yoshida was someone who had a good intention to help others, and it indicated that Saku Yoshida was a good person. It also made Saku Yoshida also tell Mitsuko Hoshino that he thought Mitsuko Hoshino was also a good person. After Mitsuko Hoshino said that Saku Yoshida was a good person for being willing to look for a shoe in the river, suddenly, Saku Yoshida told her that all of that he did because he had given the shoe to Mitsuko Hoshino while there was a diamond on the toe of the shoe, so that it made Saku Yoshida then said that he became worried that Mitsuko Hoshino would cut the diamond part and then take it away and sell it because the price was very expensive. Hearing that made Mitsuko Hoshino look very angry because of Saku Yoshida's words, as if she thought that she would really do all that. Saku Yoshida then apologized to Mitsuko Hoshino for all his words that had made Mitsuko Hoshino look very offended. But Saku Yoshida's apology did not immediately make Mitsuko Hoshino stop saying words, so he continued to overflow from his emotions by saying if he really thought like that, then why did Saku Yoshida consider her a detective? And after that, Mitsuko Hoshino called Saku Yoshida a child. While Saku Yoshida still looked calm after saying all those things, and continued to look more seriously for the shoe in the river using a wood. On the other hand, Mitsuko Hoshino began to calm down and became looking at Saku Yoshida, who according to her had an attitude that was very difficult to understand because he was very strange, which sometimes made his impression look very destroyed to him, but a few minutes later, it could change instantly by being sweet, like a prince. When Mitsuko Hoshino was thinking about it in her mind, suddenly saw a Saku Yoshida who got a shoe on the end of the wood he was holding, so that he brought the wood up to the surface of the river immediately, then said that he had expected to succeed in getting the shoe. After seeing that the shoe they had managed to find on the bank of the river, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately showed an attitude that looked very happy, then asked Saku Yoshida about whether he thought they would soon meet Soichi at the coffee shop, or if not like that they would immediately go to meet Fumie. However, Saku Yoshida had not responded to Mitsuko Hoshino's question about all the things they would do after finding the shoe. This was because, according to Saku Yoshida, there was something stuck in the toe of the shoe, so he immediately rushed to pick it up. And after he picked it up, Saku Yoshida was very surprised to see a woman's hair stuck. It also made Saku Yoshida told Mitsuko Hoshino that the hair of a woman stuck on the toe of the shoe was a very terrible thing because it showed as if there had been a murder in the river. When she saw that, Mitsuko Hoshino was very surprised because when showing the hair of a woman stuck on the toe of the shoe to her, she felt that Saku Yoshida acted as if asking her to do another investigation about the hair of a woman she found in the river. On the other hand, a woman was seen applying makeup somewhere with a friend. The woman was then seen asking her friend about whether her appearance was really attractive or not. Julia then told her friend that she had not done her hair at all, so she asked for help from her friend to help her and help her to immediately do her hair. Julia's friend then said that she knew about all the things that Julia had done so far, and even though she knew all these things, but she still felt very happy when Julia came back to see her in this place. Julia then told her friend about what she was doing, and afterwards told her that Julia was not afraid of all the things she had done to return to this place. This is because, according to Julia, this place is the only place left where she should be, and she feels very comfortable after having been a part of this place. After hearing what Julia said, her friend immediately responded to her words by throwing a sentence of praise to Julia, who, according to her, was one of the popular girls in the entire dance hall, so that many people wanted to dance with Julia. After finishing applying makeup all over her appearance so that she could look attractive, Julia then immediately left the makeup room and immediately headed to the dance room to wait for someone who wanted to invite her to dance there. Not long after, Mitsuko Hoshino, who had ordered a dance ticket, then entered the dance room and told the waiter there that at this time she really wanted to dance with someone in the dance place. After arriving at the dance place, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately met Soichi, who had long followed her steps to get into this dance place. When she saw Soichi, who already looked like a woman in front of her, Mitsuko Hoshino immediately said to Shoichi that she finally realized about the shoes that had been said by Shoichi to be a gift for her old friend turned out to be used for Soichi himself, and not for her old friend, as Shoichi had told her before. Mitsuko Hoshino, who now knows about the secrets that have been hidden by Shoichi about the origin of the shoe, then told Shoichi that actually, Shoichi could have told him about all the things that really happened to Shoichi without having to lie to him. Mitsuko Hoshino then told Shoichi that he could actually tell Mitsuko Hoshino honestly that he bought the shoes for his own use. Then Mitsuko Hoshino called Shoichi beautiful, because indeed when he was a woman, Shoichi looked very beautiful. Then after knowing Mitsuko Hoshino's existence in the place where he worked as a person who liked to dance, and after knowing that it turned out that Mitsuko Hoshino had known all his secrets, Shoichi finally immediately invited Mitsuko to dance in order to get closer to talk about all the things he wanted to explain to Mitsuko Hoshino about himself. Shoichi then immediately explained to Mitsuko Hoshino that while he was in this place, he was called by the name Julia when he dressed as a woman who he thought managed to make him more confident. In addition, Shoichi also told Mitsuko Hoshino that when he was a man he felt that when he was dressed like that, he was as if he was just wearing a borrowed body. This is because, according to him, when he was a man, he always did an unfair thing to Fumie, who was his close friend, because as if he was committing a fraud on Fumi. Shoichi then said honestly that he had never been close to anyone other than Fumi, but he felt that he was no longer strong enough to continue to do a lie to Fumi, who he thought was a very good woman to him. So that finally, Shoichi had devised a plan to invite Fumi to meet somewhere that made Fumi feel very curious about what Shoichi would talk about when he would meet him at the place. After arriving at the place, Shoichi also told Fumie that she had to listen well because Shoichi would tell her that there were important things he wanted to say to Fumi seriously, so that finally, Shoichi invited Fumi to immediately come to the Sicila coffee shop on Friday. Shoichi then explained to Mitsuko Hoshino that he planned to meet with Fumi because at the meeting, he would explain honestly to Fumi about the first man who had made Shoichi fall in love, then about how Shoichi had tried to be able to imitate what Fumi did while in front of the mirror, and also about Shoichi, who had been working as a woman who always waited for the arrival of a man in the dance room where he worked. Then, when Friday arrived, Shoichi walked to the Sicilia coffee shop to meet Fumi, who had certainly come early to wait for his arrival. But when she was walking, and had not yet arrived at the Sicilia shop to change his appearance, suddenly, a woman who turned out to be Fumi was standing in front of him wearing a pei like him. Then, according to her, Fumi was a smart woman because even when Shoichi had not changed his appearance and was still in a state of transformation as a woman, Fumi still easily recognized that a woman standing in front of her was a Shoichi who had made an appointment to meet her on Friday at the Sicilia Cafe. Fumi, who looked very surprised after seeing the appearance of Shoichi, immediately said that everything that happened tonight was a nightmare for her. Then about the shoes found by Saku Yoshida, he told Mitsuko Hoshino that he had fallen in love with the shoes from the first time he saw them, so he bought them in anticipation of wearing them when he would work in a dance room. Shoichi, who is currently a Julia, then told Mitsuko Hoshino that actually, on that night when Fumie had learned the secret about him, Shoichi felt that even though he had dressed up, he wanted to wear high heels, to be able to walk side by side with Fumi, and tell her everything about himself, who still wanted to always try to be a true friend to Fumi. Although Shoichi, who was looking like a Julia, had thoughts like that, but when he ventured to look back and say everything to Fumi suddenly, he understood that he shouldn't have shown all the secrets about himself to Fumi, who looked very sad when he found out all the things about Shoichi. But at that moment, Shoichi felt that he was on the edge of reality, which would lead him to a very strong shame for telling his identity to Fumi, so he then accelerated his steps in order to get away from Fumi immediately. That's what finally made one of her shoes become loose in the rain that poured down the street where they met. But even though she realized that at that time she was losing one of her shoes, she continued to walk because what was in her mind at that time was that all she could do was continue to walk as far as possible so that she would no longer be seen by Fumi. Julia, who seems to have shown a very sad and desperate face when being a woman, makes Mitsuko Hoshino finally tell Shoichi, who is currently dressed as Julia, that she feels sure Shoichi is not really sympathetic to living life as a woman and working in a dance hall, then encourages him by telling Shoichi that he once experienced a feeling where he was very desperate. But just then, a boss in her office, often referred to as the old cat man, told her that if we want to change things, then we must strive to change them with hard work. Mitsuko Hoshino then told Shoichi that after that, the old cat man also told him that everyone can change something bad that happened in his life by making changes together with others so that it can become more vibrant. Then Shoichi responded to Mitsuko Hoshino's story by saying that no one had ever said anything like that to him before Mitsuko Hoshino said all these things to him. Then Mitsuko Hoshino told Shoichi that it might take time to be able to do all these things, and maybe it wouldn't hurt him in the future. But according to Mitsuko Hoshino, as long as Shoichi wanted to tell stories and speak up to tell other people about the problems he was living, Mitsuko Hoshino felt sure that there would be someone who listened to all the complaints from Shoichi. After listening to all the stories explained by Shoichi about himself, Mitsuko Hoshino finally told the truth to Shoichi by saying that actually in this place there was someone who might also be known by him. The person was Saku Yoshida, a waiter who worked at the Sicilia coffee shop. She then also told him that she was a detective who had been conducting an investigation regarding the shoes found by Saku Yoshida on the street near the Sicilia coffee shop. Then, to make Shoichi even more excited, Mitsuko Hoshino finally told Shoichi that some time ago, he and Saku Yoshida, after successfully finding the shoe, immediately rushed to the house of someone who he thought always wanted to understand Shoichi's situation, namely Fumi, to explain something about Shoichi, so that there was no longer a misunderstanding between the two of them, so that they could be in a place to meet Shoichi again. When Mitsuko Hoshino and Saku Yoshida told all the things about Shoichi to Fumi, it then made Fumi immediately say that Shoichi was actually someone who was very valuable to Fumi. Fumi then told Mitsuko Hoshino and also Saku Yoshida that she and Shoichi were old friends who loved each other. She also said that she and Shoichi were very close friends, so that she could comfortably tell everything about herself to Shoichi, and that finally made her feel that she always loved Shoichi. But according to her, Shoichi never even saw her using feelings of love, so that made her very sad when remembering the events of that night when she met Shoichi. Fumi, who was very desperate for all the things that happened in the relationship between her and Shoichi, also told Mitsuko Hoshino and Saku Yoshida that they should listen well to what she had just said. So according to Fumi, they both no longer needed to spend time to make her feel excited to meet Shoichi again. After saying all the things about her and Shoichi, Fumi immediately told Mitsuko Hoshino and also Saku Yoshida to leave her immediately. But after listening to all the things, Mitsuko Hoshino felt that it seemed that everything that happened between Fumi and Shoichi was not Fumi's wish. So she then told Fumi to allow her to ask about whether all these things were Fumi's wishes or not. After hearing the question asked to Mitsuko Hoshino, Fumi immediately lowered her face and in a very lackluster tone told Mitsuko Hoshino that after the events of that night, all the things she wanted were no longer important. This is because, as a woman, Fumi feels that she will never be able to understand what has become a life choice from a Shoichi. Hearing all the things that Fumi had said made Mitsuko Hoshino and Saku Yoshida pause for a moment to think about what they should do in order to solve the problems that occurred between Fumi and Shoichi. So finally, Saku Yoshida suddenly responded to Fumi's words by saying that Fumi's thinking was really not mature enough, which finally made Saku Yoshida have to say that it was what made Fumi continue to be weak and could only be fixated on lamenting the fate she was facing with Shoichi. That made Mitsuko Hoshino immediately try to call Saku Yoshida with a little shouting, so that he immediately stopped his words, which according to Mitsuko Hoshino could make Fumi even sadder, then explained to Saku Yoshida that everyone has wisdom in taking every step in his life. Saku Yoshida then invited Fumi and also Mitsuko Hoshino to see the bigger picture of the problems that were happening between Fumi and Shoichi. What Saku Yoshida meant was that Fumi could not immediately break off the friendship between herself and Shoichi without remembering all the things they had lived together. Then Saku Yoshida asked Fumi about whether Fumi felt completely satisfied after ending all relationships with a Shoichi, and then asked about Fumi's opinion about the reason for Shoichi, who had dared to meet Fumi with his appearance as a woman. After asking about all those things, Saku Yoshida told Fumi that he felt Shoichi really wanted to be able to stay with Fumi by showing Shoichi's true state, without any things that were kept secret from Fumi. Then Saku Yoshida told Fumi that for now it was no longer important for her to know all the answers from Fumi to the questions asked by her. This was because, according to Saku Yoshida, the most important thing she had to do was think about how to get Fumi to be willing to be in the dance room to meet Shoichi, even though she was playing Julia. After Saku Yoshida explained about all the things in her mind about Shoichi's condition, it made Fumi feel sorry for her previous attitude that did not understand the conditions that happened to Shoichi, so that it made Fumi finally cry because she thought about everything that had happened between her and Shoichi. Mitsuko Hoshino, who could not bear to see Fumi crying after listening to all the words from Saku Yoshida, immediately looked at Saku Yoshida and then asked about what Saku Yoshida was doing so that he said all those things to Fumi that made her cry. Saku Yoshida then explained that he learned that from Mitsuko Hoshino, who said that everyone should help other people regardless of gender. After all the conversations that happened between the three of them, finally Fumi was willing to go along with Mitsuko Hoshino and Saku Yoshida to meet Shoichi at the dance hall where Shoichi worked as a Julia. After traveling, they arrived and Fumi immediately met Shoichi, Fumi was immediately willing to dance with Shoichi, who was currently dressed as a woman named Julia. Furthermore, Fumi, who was dealing with Shoichi, said that she honestly always admired the dance room and really liked it. Then Fumi told Shoichi to immediately see her, who was currently right next to Shoichi, wearing a dress that looked like a child. A child. Then Shoichi, who initially looked very surprised when he realized the presence of a Fumi who was willing to meet him in the dance room, finally ventured to ask Fumi something about whether he was allowed to dance with her, so they finally enjoyed their dance in the dance room. Saku Yoshida, who saw Fume and Shoichi happily dancing together, then asked Mitsuko Hoshino if they was willing to join them to dance in the dance room. Mitsuko Hoshino also said that she did not want to be seen by others when she was dancing because she felt she was not very good at dancing. That then made Saku Yoshida tell Mitsuko Hoshino that he would lead the dance between them so that Mitsuko Hoshino would be fine and become confident. Then, Saku Yoshida told Mitsuko Hoshino that he had practiced dancing since he was a child, and his statement about it made Mitsuko Hoshino very surprised. After dancing with Shoichi in the dance room, Fumi then greeted Saku Yoshida and Mitsuko Hoshino, who were seen dancing, to invite them to join Shoichi. Hearing Fumi, who invited them to gather together with them, made Saku Yoshida immediately rush to invite Mitsuko Hoshino to come to them immediately. When they were gathered together with Shoichi in the dance room, suddenly Saku Yoshida opened a shoebox containing a new shoe and then said that this was a very good shoe. When seeing it, Shoichi immediately rushed closer to Saku Yoshida and then looked closely at the new shoes bought by Saku Yoshida. When they all saw the shoes, they were very surprised because the shoes brought by Saku Yoshida were very similar to Shoichi's shoes that fell that night. Saku Yoshida then explained to them that the original shoes could not be saved, so he ordered a pair of shoes specifically to resemble Shoichi's shoes that fell in the river. Seeing the shoes made Shoichi very moved and said that the shoes were very beautiful, while on the other hand, Fumi apologized to Saku Yoshida for his sometimes unreasonable requests to find a shoe that fell in the river. Then Saku Yoshida said that not everything that happened was unreasonable, and said that Fumi Aoyama was a very valuable customer for him. Mitsuka also said that Saku Yoshida's continued support for Fumi and Shoichi was so meaningful that it made her then ask Saku Yoshida about who Saku Yoshida really was. Hearing the question asked by Mitsuko Hoshida made Saku Yoshida then feel that he had told his identity to Mitsuko Hoshino, but after he thought about it again, so he finally realized that Mitsuko Hoshino only knew him as a waiter at a coffee shop, and apparently he had never told Mitsuko Hoshino in detail about his identity. This also made Saku Yoshida then explain to Mitsuko Hoshino that he was named Saku Yoshida, who was a student and also worked as a part-time waiter at a coffee shop called Sicilian. Besides that, Saku Yoshida also told Mitsuko Hoshino that he was a child of the Yoshida descendants in the Ginza department store. After hearing all these things about Saku Yoshida, Mitsuko Hoshino was a little surprised, and after that asked Saku Yoshida about the reason behind her being a silver spoon child willing to become a waitress at a coffee shop. Whereas according to Mitsuko Hoshino, people born from wealthy families like Saku Yoshida should no longer need a salary from a workplace like the Sicilian coffee shop. Saku Yoshida then answered Mitsuko Hoshino's question by saying that all the things he did as a side job were considered by him as a way to be able to get an experience that he had not gotten in his previous life. Besides working as a full-time waiter at the Sicilian shop, Saku Yoshida also said that in his neighborhood he was also known as someone who liked to drive a taxi and help with all the housework. In response to what Saku Yoshida said, Mitsuko Hoshino then said that she likened the life lived by Saku Yoshida to having a future on a plate, in other words, already available. Then, according to Mitsuko Hoshino, why Saku Yoshida still has a desire to try and work so hard. In response, Saku Yoshida told Mitsuko Hoshino that however each person chooses a step that becomes his life choice, everything will be fine until it ends well. Then Saku Yoshida asked Mitsuko Hoshino about whether the case they had investigated would be a case that had been closed or not, while taking a position to immediately sit in front of Mitsuko Hoshino. Seeing that Mitsuko Hoshino then asked about why Saku Yoshida was even sitting in front of her while working as a waitress at the Sicilia coffee shop. But Saku Yoshida ignored Mitsuko Yoshida's question, and the knight invited her to discuss her belief in closing the case they had just investigated. After successfully sitting right in front of Mitsuko Hoshino, Saku Yoshida finally invited her to discuss more deeply about their opinions on a case that, according to Yoshida's pocket, if a man and a woman who have a relationship no more than close friends but both are both unmarried. Hearing that Mitsuko Hoshino said that it might be that between a man and a woman not married to each other, because they are still thinking about many things about their world. Saku Yoshida then said that what Mitsuko Hoshino said showed how pessimistic Mitsuko Hoshino was in her thinking. So Mitsuko Hoshino then said that she was not being pessimistic, but more towards more realistic thinking, because she thought the work she did really needed to think in that way. That's because Mitsuko Hoshino said that she would tend to affect other people's lives, one way or another, because that was part of her job. Although eventually Mitsuko Hoshino told herself that she feels that she often gets new problems that arise after she has solved a problem. Even so, it was difficult to explain the reason this time, because when she was with Saku Yoshida, she felt a sense of comfort, but she would not tell Saku Yoshida about it. Mitsuko Hoshino, who was thinking about it all inside herself, suddenly told Saku Yoshida about the case they had investigated, that when she saw Fumie and Shoichi in the ballroom, she felt that the two of them would always be fine in their future friendship. But Saku Yoshida then told Mitsuko Hoshino that he felt something was going to change, and then told Mitsuko that she looked very cute when she smiled, and Saku Yoshida suddenly called Mitsuko Hoshino a Mimi, which then made Mitsuko Hoshino look very surprised when she heard that. Mitsuko, who has succeeded in solving a case while undergoing her role as a detective, suddenly remembers a few years ago when she was still a little girl who had aspirations to become a policewoman. At that time, her father always told her not to spoil a beautiful day by expressing her dreams of becoming a policewoman. This was because, according to her father, her desire would only dishonor the Hoshino family name. According to her father, a woman should avoid the desire to become a policewoman, and her father's words in the law that exists in the Hoshino family household are absolute, so that she cannot reach her dreams of becoming a policewoman. This is how a girl from the Hoshino family who is the daughter of a policeman feels. All of that happened because Mitsuko Hoshino was born a woman, because if she had been born a man, she might have had a very good prospect of becoming a policewoman. However, because she was a woman, the Hoshino family made her invisible. After completing her duties, Mitsuko Hoshino returned to the office to fulfill an invitation from the boss in her office, who invited all detectives in the Ginza office to gather immediately. Then the office boss made an announcement regarding the office detective who had the best performance this month. The office boss then mentioned the name Mitsuko Hoshino, who was officially declared the detective with the best performance this month. The boisterous applause from fellow detectives in the office was very lively, welcoming the victory achieved by Mitsuko Hoshino. While on the other hand, it immediately made Mitsuko Hoshino become very surprised because she never thought that she would become the detective with the best performance this month. It then made friends in the office tell Mitsuko Hoshino to immediately give a few words as a winner. But Mitsuko Hoshino humbly refused, and only said that she did not need to say anything, because she felt that her journey to become a detective was still very long. Hearing what Mitsuko Hoshino said made the office boss a little confused, because suddenly Mitsuko Hoshino always shows a very humble attitude every time she gets a compliment from someone else. This is because, according to the office boss, Mitsuko Hoshino is usually someone who has a large head. The words of her office boss immediately made Mitsuko Hoshino immediately show a slightly annoyed look at her boss, but suddenly she became indifferent to the words of her office boss when she saw Saku Yoshida, who was present in her office with a bucket of flowers, and congratulated and called her Mimi. Seeing the arrival of Saku Yoshida, who congratulated Mitsuko Hoshino, made the office supervisor then say that the new part-time employee in their office had arrived. It immediately made Mitsuko Hoshino very surprised, because she did not know about this before. Then, by showing a face that looks very upset, Mitsuko Hoshino asked her office supervisor about why it should be Saku Yoshida who became the new employee. Hearing that, the office supervisor then explained that it was because he heard that recently Saku Yoshida had helped Mitsuko Hoshino in solving a case, so that it was taken into consideration to accept Saku Yoshida as a new employee at the Ginza office.